everyone, and welcome back to Two Wise Girls podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the Lost Hero, and a big theme for the first chapter especially was consent in a way that we've talked about before, but more in terms of classical mythology. So I that's definitely a topic in mind for me with these chapters. But to catch you guys up, we are reading The Lost Hero. We just finished up the kids' encounter with Enketilus. And so they're now escaping via helicopter, trying to get towards the wolf house now because they're on part 2 of their quest. So we picked up with Piper and her asking a helicopter, which presumably came to fight the fire that Enketilus lit up on the mountain. She just convinces them, let's leave and go to Oakland Airport.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so one question that arises for me right away in this, because again, they just rescued Piper's dad. And some things that that had happened earlier in the book were Piper had a dream about, like, with her mom. It wasn't necessarily fully a dream. It was an actual conversation, but her mom basically was like, your dad's going to be very, very broken over what happened. So here's a special potion so you could just erase his memory. Mm-hmm. And so Piper had already somewhat been dealing with the moral concept of, like, do I want to make my dad forget everything? Shouldn't that be his choice? How do I feel about that? But now she's seeing what the actual consequences of everything that her dad saw and went through is. And so I have to question what Rick was trying to do here just a tiny bit, because we know Tristan McLean, he can't see through the mist normally. Or at least that's our best guess, because part of the reason why he's so broken up over what happened is because now he thinks all of the myths and legends from Cherokee legend that his dad told him are true. And that if he had known that he was walking with those spirits and those deities all along, he wouldn't have been okay. But like now that illusion's broken. So like, okay, we know he didn't see through the mist, but in this chapter, some of the first things he says are, Piper, there were monsters. And so we know he saw through the mist. And so I'm not sure if Rick's going with he was that traumatized that like the mist doesn't even matter at that point, or maybe the suggestion is that the giants purposely broke through the mist somehow to like really mess with him. I'm not sure here.
I will say, I don't think you necessarily need to see literal monsters to describe them as monsters.
True.
Like, these are people that kidnapped him and told him that they were doing it to try to force his child to do something against her will, and that if she didn't do it, she was going to die. Like, they're true. Monsters. No matter what, they're monsters. And like, this is honestly like blurring the line of, to me, of what the monsters actually represent if you think too hard about like the literary analysis stuff of the Percy Jackson world. Like, I always think about the time, I can't remember when it was like last year sometime. I think a couple months before the new season started. And it was one of those times where we posted one of our clips and Becky responded on Threads. And it was the one where you were talking about how you didn't realize that Zeus was like trying to kill Percy when he was getting to camp in the books, when you were reading that part to William. And she was responding and talking about like what the mist really represents. And whatever she said just made me think like, yeah, the mist is literally this magical thing where children are being hurt and killed and hunted, and adults don't see what's in front of them and instead see something else much less threatening. And they literally are watching children being brutalized and abused, and they don't do anything. True. And I'm like, yeah, I wonder what that's representation of in real life. Maybe everything that happens to children, absolutely everything that happens to children, especially if you've been abused or you have a bad childhood or a family that is dysfunctional or whatever, that's exactly what it's like. You walk around the world and nobody sees anything that's happening to you. And so when I saw that, I was like, well, yeah, I don't know why I never thought of that before, but what else could that possibly mean from like a literary analysis sort of thing. Because
Mhm.
the thing that I'm remembering now, Becky said something about how, like, when you're a child, it doesn't matter if it's like Zeus or like, you know, somebody else in your life. They seem huge and an insurmountable thing that you can't get past. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's a lot of like the literary stuff of where these ideas probably initially came from beyond, you
Mhm.
know, Greek mythology. And so for me, when I see this, him being so upset and him talking about how scared he was, even if he couldn't necessarily physically see that they
Yeah.
were like 30 feet tall giants, he was still terrified of them enough because that whatever they were doing to him, which I don't know that we'll ever know like necessarily what they were doing,
Mhm.
which is honestly better because I don't want to know, but it also like makes you wonder like what could have happened to him that made him so upset kind of thing. But I feel like, I know I said this before, but I just feel like um when like the big villain that they're trying to bring up, which they bring up in these chapters, is somebody who wanted to rape Hera and like
Mhm.
the original stories, and the story of Gaia is somebody who was being essentially raped by her husband until her and her kids teamed up to stop him. It's like, yeah,
Mhm.
that these sort of themes have to be around, and this is just, to me, this is just another example of that same idea of seeing like monstrous things and not knowing how to react, and
Yeah.
then not knowing what the right thing is to do. um Maybe that's not what people thought most of the time when I see this stuff, but I whenever I read this stuff, especially with like Rick writing it, I'm just like, I don't know what else this could possibly ever be. um I'm
And
just, I don't
there's
just.
there's so many different ways you could take it too, though, because Tristan McLean, we know he's been somewhat running from his own culture,
Mhm,
and he does what he interprets the giant as is like a actual person from Cherokee myth. I'm probably gonna butcher this, but Sul Kalu.
mhm,
Um, because he ends up saying, real monsters, earth spirits, right out of Grandpa Tom's stories, and the Earth Mother was angry with me, and the giant Sukulu, breathing fire. They said you were a demigod, your mother was, and then Piper kind of launches into everything at that point.
mhm,
But him running from his own culture, him interpreting that as like, because I did look up that Cherokee god. He is considered the great lord of the games. He assists hunters and he roams on mountains. So he interpreted that, like, oh, here's this god roaming around on this mountain where I guess presumably you could theoretically hunt. I'm sure at least turkey. But yeah,
mhm,
so he interpreted that as something from his culture, which he's been running from. Kind of just, I feel like there's something there, but I wasn't finding a lot about this god or even this mention because when you Google this god's name, this Cherokee god's name, Lost Hero comes up. It comes up in multiple, like, how he's been referenced in modern media and stuff too.
mhm,
But
mhm,
apparently, Rick never gets that into Cherokee legend either. So,
mhm.
yeah.
He wouldn't like go super into it just because he's
Hmm.
not indigenous. And so if he ever gets a co-author for one of the books that is indigenous, then they could go into their culture. But a lot of the stuff he represents, it isn't anything he's necessarily educated in. He
Hmm.
kind of says not a little bit, but doesn't go super into it. But to
Yeah.
me, also, when I was reading this, I was just thinking of how upset her dad is. To me, is also the difference of somebody who's lived like a really traumatic life already and has had to
Hmm.
make a lot of really kind of
Yeah.
difficult choices, and how, because also just within the structure of the books itself, I was comparing this sort of reaction in my head to Sally in the Lightning Thief, that Sally knows about this world already, and that when they find her at the end of the book, it's this triumphant moment, and she can handle the fact that that Percy is a demigod because she's actually known this whole time, and she can handle the fact that she was like kidnapped and kept frozen by Hades, Lord of the Underworld, and that she turns her husband into a statue and sells him to a museum for money, and all these with like Medusa's head and all these like fantastical things. Like she handles all of that stuff really well. But he's somebody that, even though Sally's been through like hard stuff, it's a different kind of like difficulty to me when you imagine somebody who was indigenous, who grew up on a reservation and felt like he had no choice but to like leave and try to almost like leave a part of his culture behind in that way to try to get away. And that's honestly something that a lot of people with that background talk about, how hard it is to figure out what to do with that. Like, you don't want to leave your people behind, but it's also so hard to stay there and see everybody struggling and knowing that no one's ever going to help you. And so to me, it was like his character particularly is somebody who tried to more embrace like, like the Western world, basically tried to became like a, a famous actor, and never played anybody who was indigenous in any of his roles on purpose, obviously, and just kind of always had that in his mind, but like just didn't really let himself think about it too much. And so for somebody like that who grew up in like huge poverty, especially, I can like at least understand that part, especially that if I found out later on in my life that there are people responsible actually for me going through the things that I did, I would be so mad. I would be like livid, like a level of anger I've never felt before in my life, to know that there actually are people that I can directly blame and demand them to explain to me why they thought I deserved to experience any of this. Because in the normal world, without it being like a world like this, it's like these things just happen and there's nothing that you can really do about it. They just happen. But in a world like this, where there's like mystical gods that actually are in charge of all of these things, that are like sitting back and watching people go through this, especially imagining that he was with one of them and that God just like left and then like left him to that and didn't ever come back or didn't like help him with anything else after that when he was trying to figure things out on his own. That is like brutal to imagine that they are there and watching all these things, but they're just like not doing anything to help. And it's like, why does his people have to suffer for like thousands of years? Why do they have to suffer for hundreds of years for what? And that's like the kind of stuff I think about, of the choices of making like Piper indigenous and stuff. Because it's not like Rick just like, picks people's races like he's just like picking them out of a hat or something horrible. These are like these are choices that he made with the backgrounds of the characters in these books, even if it doesn't seem obvious the first time you read it or something. There was a choice. He had to figure this stuff out. And so for me, when I think about him, especially with Piper and everything, it would just be so much harder to try to deal with that it was kind of like refreshing in a weird way to me to see somebody that can't deal with it, because so many of the parents that do know just magically deal with that. And I don't think most people would be able to find out something like that and just have to like process something like that. Like, what do you mean? I would be I'm already scared to leave the house. I would literally become a shut-in if somebody told me that there could be a magical reason behind every single thing that ever happened in the world. I couldn't trust anybody.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's see. Trying to think, was there anything big in this one before we move to the second one? I mean, the reason consent comes up so much in this is because right away, Piper, she feels guilty because she has to use charm speak on her dad. And she has to use charm speak on her dad because her dad's freaking out so freaking bad that they can't get him to get in the helicopter at first. And so she's like, I don't like that I'm having to do this, but there's no other choice. And so she starts thinking about his consent there. When she has to tell him, hey, my mom was a goddess, I'm sorry you didn't know, I didn't know either until literally this all just happened. And like she realizes there was no consent there. let's see. She also starts pondering the consent of taking away the memories, and she does it for like a few different reasons. One of which being she has always seen her dad as this big heroic figure in her life, and so her kind of switching roles with him, she's like, he's just gonna forget all of this. He's just gonna forget that like we shared all of this, and that I saved him, and that I did all of this, and I mean, even he ends up remarking it when we get there, but I don't know. It's so refreshing to see an Aphrodite kid even thinking about this, and Piper's thoughts say this as well, because it is such a theme with Aphrodite in mythology that she takes away people's consent in a lot of the stories. I believe the last time I really talked about this in depth was when we were talking about maiden helpers. And we've talked about them a few different times. I'm thinking specifically when we went over Mr. D's big speech in Titan's Curse, where he's like, "Oh, you heroes just like to use people and stuff." And I did defend some of the heroes in that a lot of the time. It's either Aphrodite or Hera that are like playing puppets with people and are like, I really like this hero. I want him to succeed on his quest. So I'm just going to push this girl in his direction. I mean, they're not the only ones. Athena doesn't even like love. She's done it. I used it in my wedding vows, actually. And it's not in a romantic sense, at least, but she uses a maiden helper on Odysseus, sort of without her consent. Has a little princess meet him as he washes up on shore after escaping Calypso. And she told the little goddess in her ear, "You should do laundry out on the beach. Maybe you'll find a husband that way." And she runs into Odysseus and wants to save him, but he's like, "Hey, I'm already taken, but can you help me get home?"
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of stories with a lack of consent, and it's like an obvious theme, I think, in Heroes of Olympus overall, because there is some of that with the gods in the first 5 books, but especially in this one, with the way that it's particularly where the way that it's set up, like Jason and Percy have 0 consent. They have no consent over what has already happened to them. Their memories were wiped. They were just taken, literally taken from a life that they were living. And all of their memories were just stolen from them, and they were just plucked somewhere and dropped there. And they had no choice of the matter. And the entire book, Hera's been trying to convince Jason, at least, that it was like for the best and that this was like some good thing that she was doing or whatever. And either way, they have to save Hera, but it's also like you could have just asked them. Like, I know we've definitely said that before, but it's definitely true. They could have just asked them. If they went, at least we for sure know with Percy, that if they went to Percy and they told him, "We need you to go undercover because there's actually a Roman camp that exists. We've kept you guys separated because you guys used to fight a lot and we didn't want that to happen. And so we need you to infiltrate this Roman camp because the next thing that's going to happen is you guys have to work together in order for the next prophecy to like come true." There's no way that he would have been like, no. He absolutely would have gone. And if they would have given him like a choice to say like on his own terms, even just to say yes, like even just the point, like when he goes on the quest, he can't really say no, but he's still able to like decide when he wants to leave and who he wants to go on the quest with him and stuff. At least he could have, instead of just like disappearing into the night and being forced to go through all of this stuff that we haven't even read yet in the next book. And also Annabeth would have known what was going on with him. He would have been able to tell her. And even if she never told anyone else, they at least would have known. At least she would have known. And then his mom could have known where he was. And the people that are worried about Jason right now, if he could have done the same thing. And so when you have a story like that, that's kind of based around like gods literally like wiping people's entire memory, which is basically their entire personality, and just like deciding what they should do. You have also like the stories like that they reference in this book, like Medea being forced. She was somebody that Aphrodite put a spell on and forced her to fall in love with Jason, and then her entire life was just destroyed. There's so many things like that. And so I would just like read the chapters as they were, but then afterwards I was just like, but should Piper have done like any of that? Like I spent a lot of time
Yeah.
thinking about consent. Consent is not an easy like black and white thing. People sometimes describe consent as like there just is consent or there isn't. It's a very like kind of nebulous topic. There can be consent and then it can
Mhm.
disappear really quickly, and it really depends on every single situation. There are, I've said before that there are
Yeah.
situations where there just never is consent, even if both parties think that there is. Sometimes in abuse dynamics, there honestly never is, even if you believe that there is. And so it's a very complicated thing. And so I feel like a lot of this book so far is kind of bringing up themes of that stuff that's like taking place with her doing the stuff that she does with her dad, and then also everything else she does, like literally everything that she does in these chapters is kind of like having to choose to do the things that like the gods do. She's just like making people do things that they don't actually want to do, knowing that they don't
Mhm.
actually want to do them, but is like feels like she's forced to make them do it because they don't have time to like convince them. Even the stuff with her dad, I don't know that she should have done that. Like I
I
don't
think
know
it
that.
was like the best she could have done with the circumstances, but
Yeah.
like even then, it definitely leaves you with the feeling of I don't know how to feel about this.
Yeah, and I'll say like this is something I do with myself all the time. Like I always think about things that I used to do, especially in the past, and even in the past could be like 3 months ago, and I'll just sit there and think like, should I have done that? Was that fair to that person? Because it's when you've had your consent robbed from you the way that I did, you just think about it all the time because you want to be sure that you don't, if you can, that you don't do those sort of things to other people. And Piper definitely had her consent taken away from her before, with
Hmm.
how she ended up going to like wilderness schools and having to live this life with Aphrodite and never knowing what the heck was ever going on, and being forced to
Even
like,
like having the memories of Jason being her
yeah,
boyfriend in her brain.
yeah, she literally has fake memories about someone in her mind. The person that's like giving her the strength to keep going in these chapters is a fake relationship that she knows doesn't really exist. But that's like the thing, but she feels like it's real. And so she's trying to like, it's something that she can do right now basically to help her keep going, but still it's not actually real. And it's just this is like the stuff I just think about. I don't want people to think that we're saying like these characters are bad or doing bad things, but it's just like the thing to think about of like she felt like she had to do that to her dad to like get him to leave because they had to leave. But it's also a thing that you think about later on, like, should I have actually done that? Was there a different way that I could have gotten that done with him not having to like manipulate his memories to get him to come on and do something that he doesn't want to do, because especially because he's terrified, not because he's like
Yeah.
angry and like trying to fight them or something, but purely just because he's really scared and he doesn't know what's going on, and just doesn't know how to deal with everything and just needed like a second basically. And they don't have time because they're in the middle of a big like a time sensitive battle that she feels like she can't explain to him yet. But it is just like one of those things you think about afterwards, like, should I have done that with him? Should I have like tried to do something else? Is there a way that I could try to avoid this if I do this with another person later on? But I just
Yeah.
think this kind of theme is always going to be around just because her powers are so like teetering on an edge all the time, of because of what they are. They have to be teetering on the edge of
Hmm.
like of whether you're like going too far or if you're manipulating people, just purely just manipulating people. Because maybe this is just how I think, but when I was reading these chapters and how she was just like convincing people, like having to, I get it, but still convincing people to do stuff that they never wanted to do. I was just thinking, like, what if Selena had that power? Like, did Selena have that power, but we just didn't know? Did she like use that
Yeah.
power to try to like stop people at camp from questioning stuff too much until it got to like the end point? And it's just, did like Luke use that power to like get things from other people, to have her be the one to make people do things or whatever? And it's just like, it's that kind of stuff you have to think
Yeah.
about. Like, even like the kid that was in season 2, the guy at the end in like the 7th episode that shows up trying to do charm speak with Clarice, and she like like throws him against the wall and is just like, absolutely not. Like, you're not doing that to me. But it's like she feels like she has to do that to stop him from trying to basically to try to like manipulate her or gaslight her so that she doesn't, ask him questions that he doesn't want to answer. And it's just it's a complicated thing to bring up, but I'm glad that he does, because it's fun to talk about in this context, to make people think about, like, why did he choose to make Aphrodite's powers, like where did he come up with the idea of charm speak? Because Aphrodite is fucking manipulative. Like,
Yep.
there's so many stories where she manipulates people and makes them do things they don't want to do. She's the one that caused the Troy War. She just talked about it with Piper, and she thinks that it was worth it because they make a cute couple. And it's like, you like destroyed hundreds and thousands of people's lives because you think that they are a cute couple. And it's like, that's a dangerous power for anyone to have. So you better be somebody that's very like grounded in reality, and like a very kind, empathetic, like compassionate, caring person like Piper is, if you're gonna have that power. Otherwise, you are terrifying.
Hmm.
Whoa, that would be scary to imagine someone who would use that power for evil and like what they would do with it.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's Aphrodite is so powerful that it's said that she's the only other god who can, like, kind of control Zeus. And I mean, you think about how many adventures she gets in with other women. Yeah, she can. So,
Mhm.
yeah, what Piper decides to do, at least at this point, is she does tell her dad everything. While she's pondering, do I really want him to forget this yet? She decides, I'm just going to tell him everything. And then when they finally get to the airport, though, that's where she has to make the real decision, because she realizes she can't just leave him in this state, and they have to keep moving. They have to go to the Wolf House, and so she has no idea what to do at first. She's thinking, like, we got to stop the mission and take him home completely, until Coach Hedge steps up. And I kind of like the back and forth we get with Coach Hedge and Piper in this chapter on how they feel about each other. Their relationship's a little bit interesting, a little bit cute. I feel like they're trying to do a little bit of what they did with Chiron and Annabeth here,
Mhm.
because she's like, Piper's thinking as soon as he volunteers and is like, you know what, I'm supposed to be a protector. I will take care of your dad. She's like, I really feel bad that I just talked about Coach Hedge getting his ass handed to him 2 seconds before.
Yeah. I thought that was nice though, for Hedge to like almost like give in and be like, fine, I'll go be the protector like I'm supposed to, and stop trying to beat everybody up really badly. Because I know that's
Yeah.
what I'm actually supposed to be doing.
Yeah. And so the way that they decide to split up the groups, when they get to Oakland Airport, Piper remembers that's where my dad flew into. So his private jet is there. Coach Hedge is going to take the private jet, take Tristan back to his mansion, presumably, because the Giants don't know anything about technology. They left him with his Palm Pilot, and she's able to just go, here you go. Here's everything you need. And luckily, Hedge, I presume, would be in touch enough with the mortal world that he knows how to use that. And so
Mhm.
they split up that way. But before they do, Piper does tell him about the vial. And let's see. Before the vial, though, they have this one conversation I wanted to talk about really quick. Let's see. So she says, or he says, I can't believe it. I've failed you. And she says, no, Dad. The things they did, Piper, the visions they showed me. Dad, listen. She took the vial from her pocket. Aphrodite gave me this for you. It takes away your recent memories. It'll make it like none of this ever happened. He gazed at her as if translating her words from a foreign language. But you're a hero. I would forget that? Yes, Piper whispered. She forced herself an assuring tone into her voice. Yes, you would. It'd be like before. He closed his eyes and took a shaky breath. I love you, Piper. I always have. I sent you away because I didn't want you exposed to my life. not the way I grew up. The poverty, the hopelessness, not the Hollywood insanity either. I thought I was protecting you. He managed a brittle laugh, as if your life without me was better or safer. And so I did want to talk about that one because once again, we do see a little bit of, like a protective mortal parent. This one protecting her from real things, not from fake things, because again, he was not even aware this whole other part of the world existed before this. And the very real things he's protecting her from are the things we all know that natives deal with, like the poverty on reservations, the feeling that you're stuck, that there's not really a way to excel in life, and especially you think of the hopelessness of the culture loss happens regardless of the fact that there's these little places because of how much early American settlers devastated native colonies. So,
And just to like bring in things that happened past when this book was published and stuff when it comes
yes.
to the different reservations. The reservations in different states, at least I know for sure the Navajo reservation, Arizona, were hit the worst when it came to COVID. When COVID was ravaging everybody in 2020 before we had even a vaccine, they had the highest death count. Like where I remember that they were trying to get people to help them deal with like their bodies of all the people especially who died. And I know that there's a lot of there's a couple um reservations in Wisconsin. There's a big one in northern Wisconsin that takes up a lot of space in a good way, I mean. But still, there's at least two of them that I know of that I've like driven by before. And I know that they would struggle with it because they don't have access to the things that we even had, and we as people who lived in like the rest of the world basically and aren't like ostracized for being there, were struggling getting things. Like if I couldn't find a mask, like I seriously doubt that people who live on reservations had access to anything when they don't have access to normal things. Like look up on TikTok the things that are there of people who live on reservations showing how much their food is at their stores. Like a 12 pack of soda is like $18. Much on like much less in a time where things are short now. And so he didn't I this is why I like his whole thing, is that he felt like, and this is something that I think I remember saying when they had their scene, when they like at the very beginning of the book, when they were when she was remembering them talking on the beach before Jane showed up and she had to go to the wilderness school and stuff, that she was thinking about how she just wished that her dad was there. And that was like one of those things I remember thinking during that scene, is that he keeps thinking that she's better off without him, that she's better off in these other places, and she's doing these like reckless things because she just wants him to be around. And he doesn't like realize that that's all she actually wants. And that if he would stop thinking that she just like needs to be somewhere else to be happy, and realize that she just wants to be around him to be happy, that at least some of that stuff wouldn't happen as much. And it just is him on his own realizing that right now, that like, yeah, I sent you away because I thought that would be better, because I didn't think that I could do this. And he's like, I should have just tried anyway, because now you spend all these years in all these horrible places when you weren't actually happy either. And it's not like he was happy dealing with that at all. He never struck me as somebody that was exactly happy about that setup. It just was like what he thought was best, basically. I do like that his character tried to protect her from like famous people, from Hollywood and stuff, because we know how that is.
Yeah, and I like it's so easy to become a nepo baby. I mean, most of Hollywood these days feels like it's nepo babies. I feel like every once in a while I'll find someone, I'm like, oh, this person's completely brand new, and it's like, no, that's Ethan Hawke and what's her face?
Uma Thurman.
I can't remember her name. Uma Thurman's daughter. Yeah, the girl from Stranger Things. Like when she came on the scene, I was not one of the people who clocked it right away, but yeah, when I heard that, I'm
Even
like, okay, it is just a bunch of nepo babies.
it shows how hard it is to actually succeed in that world. I mean, even with like our kids, like from Percy Jackson, Leah's godparent is Idris Elba. Like I was like, When I found that out, I was like, okay, well, that's probably why her brother's been acting his whole life, basically, and she's been like modeling and acting since she was like 2 years old. But there's probably other ones of the kids that probably have connections with other things or people. There are a good amount of them that don't really.
Yeah.
Besides living in like LA or something, you know. But still, she was one that has a direct connection to a very famous person that I was like, oh, that's probably why she was on like Empire when she was 6, because this was just like normal for her family to be involved in that industry from the time that they were young, because that's probably how her parents grew up and stuff. To have Idris freaking Elba as your
Mhm.
godparent. But it's just like, yeah, it's hard even for people from marginalized background to get ahead. And so a lot of them have to like, you have to have an in to get to know somebody basically a lot of the time to get ahead. And I don't think he wanted her to deal with like that sort of cutthroat world, but then she got exposed to it anyway, going to like these different schools and stuff she had to go to, dealing with racist white kids.
Yeah. But yeah, that I it's refreshing to have a parent who really did like in his own like his whole stuff doesn't come from neglectfulness in the way that like Frederick Chase, who's like, I'm just mad historian, like mad scientist, but mad historian who's like so dedicated to my craft that I just forget my daughter exists sometimes, or even Thalia and Jason's mom, who it's like, oh, I'm so self involved and I want to feel so important that my kids don't really matter to me. Here's one where it's like, my kid matters to me, but I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so it's a different type of struggle we see from parents, and I feel like it's a very real one. You can feel like, I have no idea how to deal with this, so I'm gonna push everybody away.
That's why I don't have any kids, because I would never be able
Mm-hmm.
to deal with that. That would be way too much. And so, but he doesn't exactly have that choice when Aphrodite just like drops a kid off and disappears. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, pretty
I did
much.
like that, because like Frederick Chase is basically somebody who should have been diagnosed with autism and never was. Of
Seriously.
course, serious. I'm being serious about that. And like what? Like that one scene in Titan's Curse where he derails their entire discussion because Zoe starts talking crap about their battle strategy, and then he's like, "Wait, what's
Yeah.
wrong with their battle strategy?" And it's like
Yeah.
they're telling him like, your daughter is going to die, but he like can't stop from asking her like, what do you mean my imaginary game has a bad battle strategy? Can you tell me what I got wrong about this historical thing that I'm like recreating in my office that I never. Yeah, that's every autistic person. And so, but with him it's more like, it's just like intergenerational trauma from like hundreds and thousands of years of his people being harmed, that it's like he feels the pressure of all of that, of having to like somehow do the right thing now. That's a lot of pressure to
Mm-hmm.
feel, and so he just doesn't know how to do it, and so he just sends her away. And so even though he's still not there, it's still, you can understand like why he would struggle with this kind of stuff. um yeah.
Yeah. So, what Piper decides to do, like as the first part of that reading suggested, she tells him she has the vial. She tells him what it'll do. She basically puts it in his hands at that point. And I have to say that when your choices are as shitty as Piper's choices were, I can respect that one of like, I'm going to tell you everything. I'm going to tell you what this does. Here you go. And she does say it in a way of like, maybe one day we can talk about all of this again. And, like realizing my dad is not the super strong hero guy I thought he was. I am going to have to be strong here. Like, I am going to have to step up here. And
Mhm.
he recognizes she's doing that too before he takes the vial. It's just like, I mean, it's shitty circumstances, but I feel like she gave him the most consent she possibly could in that situation.
She did. I really liked how Rick wrote that he wrote it as she just very similar. Rick is very big on consent, because I was thinking about this the other day, that when at the end of The Lightning Thief, when Percy realizes that Sally was being hit by Gabe too, the way that he offers Medusa's head to her is like, Mom, do you want to be free of this person? Do you
Hmm.
want to get away from this person? Because you deserve to get away from this person. There is something in this backpack that if you use it, you can get rid of him from our lives. And I'm okay with you doing that. But it's up to you if you want to actually do it. And he leaves and lets her decide if she wants to use Medusa's head or not. And she obviously does, but he leaves it up to her to decide whether she actually wants to. And so she gets to have like the choice. And this is basically the same thing, that she's giving her dad really the choice of like, if you take this, you'll forget about all these really traumatic things that happen to you that might seem like insurmountable to deal with right now. And even if it means that
Hmm.
you know this like truth about me, but it gives him the chance to like think about it and decide for himself what he wants to do. And so if the next time we see him he doesn't remember anything, then we know at least he's the one who decided that, instead of these like powerful things deciding. They're deciding. And I do really like that trend that he does so far of like giving these parents the opportunity, but giving them the option to like actually decide for themselves what they want to do instead of it being forced on them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely just the best way you could do any of this because I do think she deserves to have somewhat of her normal life back.
Mm-hmm.
This is such a silly comparison, but did you ever watch the Rugrats episode where Tommy's dad, he like gets hit on the head or he falls off a roof, I think, and then he thinks he's a baby, and like at the end of the episode he decides like, oh yeah, I don't want to grow up, but I gotta go back to being your dad, Tommy, and he goes back on the roof and lets himself get hit again because cartoon magic, that's how you undo brain damage apparently.
Apparently.
Yeah, this kind of feels like a Rick Riordan version of that. Of like, I do love also that Tristan recognizes I'm not gonna like remember that my daughter just did all of this. I'm not gonna remember who she actually is. I'm not gonna know these very very important things about her. Which is hard. So her reassurance here, it's just like this whole thing is heartbreaking at the same time too.
Yeah, and I won't pretend like when I was reading this part, I sat there for a while afterwards and thought, like, what would I do? Like, if somebody said, like, if you take this potion, you'll forget everything that your dad ever did to you, it would be very tempting to just take it and
Yeah.
not have to know about any of that anymore, not have to think about it anymore. It's like, who would I be if all of that trauma was gone and I could actually just like decide what I want to do for myself without the like crippling fear and all of that stuff that comes with all of that? Like, it would be very tempting to just take it, even if it means that I would be a completely different person and I would have absolutely no idea who that is. No idea, absolutely no clue who that would be. But it still would be a tempting idea to just be like, I don't want to remember any of this. And maybe I shouldn't have to. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a strange thing to think about, but I always, whenever stuff like this comes up, I always think about like, would I do that? Like, if somebody, no one would ever offer that to me, but I just think like, would I want to do that? Like, yeah, I probably would, but I don't know if I actually could go through with it, or if I would just be like too scared of like
Mhm.
who I would be if all of that was taken away. I don't know.
Yeah, it's such a big what if. Um, let's see. So at this point, he takes the potion, passes out, and Coach Hedge basically drags him onto his private plane. Where Coach Hedge is super excited for veggie enchiladas and root beer and linen napkins that he could eat. um,
Mhm.
and then they have to decide what they're going to do now. The three kids, because Tristan's taking off in the private jet. They still have this helicopter that Piper managed to convince the pilot to take them to Oakland Airport. The pilot, I don't think I said this yet. All the while, the pilot has been getting calls on the radio of like, "Hey, where are you going? What direction are like?" Very much, people know this aircraft is headed in a wrong direction. While there is an active fire on a mountain, that again, I'm presuming this helicopter's job was something involving the fire.
Yeah, it was
So
probably one of those helicopters that drops the
yeah,
stuff that they drop when huge wildfires are happening to get it to go
Exactly.
out. And it's also flying and landing at an airport that it doesn't have clearance to, like, you can't just like land at it, especially at a major airport. You
Yeah.
have to talk to air traffic controllers and like plan it all out because there's so many other people doing different routes. You could easily like smash into each other. Like what was happening actually like a year ago when they didn't have enough air traffic controllers working. And so I'm just imagining all the people having heart attacks watching this like one plane fly all
Yeah,
these
like, what
different
are they doing?
directions.
Yeah, because Piper managed to charm speak even their way into landing clearance. So what they decide, because at first they're like, okay, let's take the helicopter to the Wolf House. But they then get an Iris message from Dahlia, and in the background of the Iris message, a lot is happening. They're like fully at battle. The hunters are managing to hold them back, but they're not going to be able to for much longer. Porphyrion is rising is kind of her big warning, so you need to hurry. And the kids are like, we can't just take this random ass pilot into an active battle. That's irresponsible. And
Mm-hmm.
so they ask Leo, can you do it? And Leo, he uses his Hephaestus powers. He puts his hand on the helicopter and he thinks about it for a second, and he can sense the technology. He says, like, I know exactly what kind of helicopter this is. I know how fast it goes. The tank's near full. Sure, I could do it. And then I love that we jump into his perspective next. Like,
Of him
because
being
he's
like,
like, yeah, sure, I could do it. And then he's like freaking out. He's like, well, I'm managing to do okay when I don't think about it and I'm just on autopilot myself. But if I think about it too hard, I freak out and something happens.
yeah, there's one part here where Piper comes to talk to him and ask basically like, are you sure you can do this? Are you okay? Like checking in on him, and they're like joking back and forth. And I was like, this is like the one relationship that is actually real right now. Like Piper and Jason and Leo, and nothing with Jason is necessarily like real. It's very confusing to figure out what's real with them and what's not, because they have all these memories that they're all based on that aren't real. And I'm like, but this friendship is actually real. They were actually, friends and stuff before Hera shoved all these fake memories in their minds and made them think that Jason was also a part of like their friend group or whatever. And so it was like every time Piper and Leo interact, I always think it's fun because you get to see like the kind of people they were before any of this stuff was like forced upon them, and that they probably always had a good friendship and would have always been friends and gotten along because they just seem to actually like, actually like each other, not
Yeah.
because of like magical intervention, but because they actually just do.
Yeah, I feel like Piper doesn't get disarmed in the same way that Leo tries to do by all of his, like, I'm gonna humor everything. She just rolls with the punches and says something back to him, and I love that about their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like Leo is trying to distract himself in a lot of this chapter because he knows, like, if I'm thinking too hard, I'm not gonna fly well. And so he decides he'll ask, what's the Wolf House? And for some reason, Jason's having another like snap back moment where he's remembering more than feels like should be allowed. Because Dahlia had told them, you know the Wolf House, Jason. We've been there. Remember the last place we were together. And we had talked about that memory. I can't remember if it was the last Lost Hero episode we did or two ago, but essentially, Jason and Dahlia's mom took them to a park, and Thalia went to go get the picnic basket, I believe. And then she came back and Jason was gone. So we know that he was left at this place.
Mm-hmm.
He remembers it. He says it is an abandoned mansion in the Sonoma Valley. A demigod built it, Jack London. Now, all the time we were talking about Wolf House, and I live in the Bay Area, I did not know that there was an actual place in a park called the Wolf House. So this is an actual thing. It's actually called the Wolf House. You can look at pictures of it. It's like basically just the stone foundation of what would have been this mansion. And so what Jason tells them is Jack London was a demigod. He says a son of Mercury. And let's see. Piper remembers this is the guy who wrote Call of the Wild, White Fang. And he's like, yeah, he was an adventurer. He traveled the world. He was even a hobo for a while. Then he made a fortune writing. He bought a big ranch in the country and decided to build this huge mansion, the Wolf House. And Leo's like, did he name it that because he likes wolves? Like, no, he is dropping hints about his personal experience. And Rick's basically using this author because he has a very mysterious past, as in we don't really have record of some of the things. So he's using the fact that his dad's kind of mysterious in what we know about him as, oh yeah, his dad's just Mercury.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like why not?
Yep. And as this conversation is going on too, Leo's like, wait, you're freaking me out. Are you remembering your past or not? And Jason's like, pieces. Only pieces, none of it good. But we do find out the Wolf House is on sacred ground. It's where Jack London started his journey as a child, where he found out he was a demigod. That's why he returned there. He thought he could live there, claimed that land, but it wasn't meant for him. The Wolf House was cursed. It burned in a fire a week before he and his wife were supposed to move in. A few years later, London died and his ashes were buried on the site. And then Jason says he also started his journey there too. It's a powerful place for demigods, a dangerous place. And so Gaia is trying to then use the power of the sacred land to do all of her evil deeds.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what she's doing here, entombing Hera and giving rise to Porphyrion. Those are the two goals. Let's see. I also, part of me wants to be super duper hopeful with something here, and it's the fact that Leo has another kind of thinking diatribe in this chapter where he starts remembering his mom again. And he's like, everyone's going to get happy reunions. We're going back to where Jason's from. Piper met with her dad. I'm not going to get my happy reunion. I'm still a foster kid. I still have nobody that wants to take me in. I won't be going back home. I won't get to see my mom after this. I somehow feel like the way his mom disappeared feels like maybe she didn't really disappear. But I think it might just be my wishful thinking.
Yeah, and even with Leo, it's like Jason's not going to see his mom again.
True.
Not, I don't know that Jason would want to see his mom again right now, probably, but still, he's not going to see her again. He has Thalia. That's true, but still, his mom is gone. His dad is, Zeus. And so that's not exactly the best either, but still, I get it. I'm definitely that person usually where people are saying stuff like that. And I'm like, I'm never going to get that. I wonder what that's like. And that's basically what that is a lot of Leo's whole struggle going forward, is feeling like he's like less than, or always missing something or something.
Yeah.
There are some things that happen later on that have to do with sort of his not his mom, but like his mom's family, I guess, that gets brought up with other characters and stuff like further. But that's at least like 2 books away, because those people don't interact in the next book.
Yeah. But Leo's thinking things like he's hearing the helicopter shuddering sounds like Morse code, not the end, not the end. So that was part of why it was like, I kind of want him to see his mom again, but that's a little too much to ask for an ending for a story like this. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Trying to think if there's anything towards the end that I wanted to. Let's see. I mean, more about the mist happens in this end of this chapter too. Leo thinking about with Piper's dad's memory getting erased. How's that going to affect his personality? What if Jason's full memory coming back would affect his personality? All of the consent and memory stuff and how that affects their personality. Definitely. I mean, we already talked about this, but it is a good question to ask of how much the personality would change, because even Jason thought it. Even Jason's like, if I die, am I going to get judged based on everything I did before, or am I only going to get judged on the stuff I remember?
Yeah, and it's also just the idea of Jason right now doesn't remember anything really about his life. Yeah. And so I remember both of them, Leo and Piper, thinking Piper saying to Leo at a certain point, I need Jason right now, but who is he going to be when he has when he remembers everything? Are we even going to like that person? Because it's not the person that we actually know right now. Because is he actually a different person? Like, yeah, they're afraid that he's going to like turn against them or something. But even without that, it's just like, yeah, with all of his memories of his old life, is he going to want to like choose them in the same way when he has an actual choice of who he wants to be around? And it's that kind of stuff that's just hard to know, because taking your memories away does make you slightly different. It just does. It just makes you a different person. Like Percy in the next book is still Percy, but there are certain things about him that are a little bit like they're similar, but they're like different because he doesn't remember anything. Like
Yeah.
I saw an old like a screenshot on my phone of a scene that made me that I know that I was saving from like a year ago when we were talking about him having suicidal ideation. I'm
Oh,
guessing because it was a scene that I know is in it is in the next book of him just like making like a joke about it. Like a character says something about like I'm gonna kill you, and he says like a almost like a joke like, oh, I wouldn't fight you too hard on it or something like that, and they're like, what? And he's like, never mind. And there's just times in the next book where he says things like that he usually wouldn't say or out loud, except for
yeah.
that one scene in Titan's Curse. Besides that, he doesn't really say it out loud to people. But in this version where he doesn't remember anything, and he just is like doesn't know what the heck is going on and why people are so mad at him and things like that, he says it out loud more often when he doesn't remember anything. And then when he gets his memories back, he goes back to not saying those things out loud anymore. And it's like stuff like that, that just there's things about you that would be different if you didn't have the memory of the people in your life that made
Yeah.
you like think about yourself a little bit differently, I guess.
Yeah. Let's see. So that discussion, Leo and Piper are kind of having it together. Leo's recognizing it's not just her dad that she's having to deal with this, like, is the memory thing going to happen with, or it's not just Jason, it's her dad too. So she's kind of gonna be super duper insecure. But while they're having this conversation, the helicopter dips and they hit a storm, which, like, I mean, red flag right away for Keone. But that, I mean, that's the first person that comes to mind for me, even though I do know that they, like, part of this was fighting the Venti as well. So, it could be either, but
Yep.
they've pissed off a number of storm spirits already, so it's not
Mhm.
looking good that the helicopter's hitting a storm.
No, we'll see what. I honestly don't remember what happens. Like, I keep
Yeah.
looking at the cover and I'm like, I think I know what the thing behind them on the cover is now.
Hmm.
In my version of the cover, at least, like that
Yeah.
version. And I'm like, but I don't know. I don't know what's going on for the rest of this cover. But
Yeah.
still, I keep looking at that. The whole book, I kept looking at the cover, being like, I don't know what this big mansion is. And now at least I know what the mansion is, but I still don't know. I have nothing. I have
Hmm.
no memory about what happens. And I had no memory of any of this stuff either. And so it's all going to be new to me for the first time, even though it will be actually the second time.
Yeah. So, that's what we read for today. We gotta be so damn close to finishing this.
Mm-hmm. It's like that.
It's gonna be like two more podcasts worth. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we are very, very close. We'll find out what happens when they hit that. And I need to get on buying myself a copy of Son of Neptune. So
So do I. I like getting the used copies from half price books. I usually ask my mom to take me there when I want a new book. The only new
yeah,
books I've gotten is when my aunt just like took me to a bookstore once and was like, pick out like a couple books you want. Otherwise, I don't buy like new books anymore.
pretty
They're
much.
expensive.
Yeah, it's not worth it. So there, I go to used bookstores too. For some of our younger viewers that might not know, used bookstores tend to be generally locally owned, and so it's a good way to support local businesses, not give that money to Amazon. Of course, support your local libraries too.
Mhm.
Even things like taking stuff off the shelf and putting them at the carts that they have on the end is helping them because you're showing that somebody's using the resources.
Hmm.
So, I did that recently where it was like I was looking through the library and I was like, I could put it back on the shelf or I could show them. Someone took this book off the shelf and looked at it for a second and took pictures of pages. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always the library is always great. Um, Never forget about going there because I went there a lot when I was growing up. Um, and used bookstores are usually also sell. Sometimes the books are more expensive than Amazon because they're actually selling them at the rate that they're supposed to be sold, so that the authors actually like are able to make more of a living off of their books being sold. Amazon sells books cheaper than they actually should be sold because they don't care about that kind of thing. And so that's why people forever have been wanting people to use actual bookstores instead of places like that that will sell things at like a loss because they don't care about that because they make up their money in other places. But for like the authors that are forced to sell their books on Amazon, they're the ones that loses out on. They don't make that much royalties anyway, but they lose out a lot on the ones when they are mostly sold on Amazon, but they also don't really have a choice, you know? They have to sell it on there. It's the place that most people buy new things at this for the last whatever 20 years or something. And well, I'm trying to remember when Amazon became a thing. I don't remember. I remember when it was like created, honestly. I can remember explaining it to my other family members
Mhm.
to and we didn't trust that it was actually real. Like we when we
Yeah.
the first things we bought, we weren't sure if it was like a scam.
Yeah.
And if we would, and we were like excited that we actually got the things that we ordered because we honestly weren't sure if it actually was or not,
Yeah.
which is weird to
Um,
think about.
to give like some of our college age viewers kind of a frame of reference, when Shannon and I would have been going to college, it wasn't really a thing to be able to buy your textbooks online. You maybe got lucky if your college had some of the textbooks used there, because some colleges did allow people, or they still do, allow people to like sell back their textbooks if another professor is going to be using it. But because textbooks do this stupid thing where it's like we're going to put out a new edition every 2 years because we need to update the pictures and the graphs, um, that like a lot of times you weren't able to sell them back. So we didn't even have, now they have a bunch of sites to be able to like rent textbooks and stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't a thing when we first went to college. Like,
No, I
yeah.
remember when I went and then dropped out, when I went back to do associate's degree that had been created. Where I remember my sister telling me about that and she was really excited. I was like, "Oh, there's this one website now that exists where you can rent your textbooks where it's way cheaper because those were so expensive and we were like those people in class where like the first 2-3 weeks or whatever of class we didn't have the book because we couldn't afford it, and we would like have to get it late because we would try to find the cheapest version that we could actually get, and then by the time we got it we were like 2 or 3 weeks behind of reading in our class, but it was like there's nothing else that you could do. We just like hoped that nobody would call on us or whatever in class during those times because we didn't know anything.
Yeah.
Like, what are we gonna do? And so it was really exciting when I think it was called Chug, when they became a
Okay.
thing.
Yeah.
Because then we actually had like all of our books at the beginning of the semester for like the first time ever. Like even when we were in school, when we were growing up, my mom had like one of her big struggles every year at the end of summer as a teacher when she hadn't been like full time teaching for the whole summer, and they get paid like at the beginning of summer, but it would be a challenge to make that last
Yeah, I'm
throughout the
sure.
entire summer. That we always had to buy. She always had to get us school supplies like right before school started because she had to like get money from her other jobs in order to afford it. And it was the same sort of thing. Sometimes we didn't have the stupid things on their stupid lists that we were supposed to have at the beginning of every school semester. And so that's just like a normal thing. It's a lot there. Things are more aggregated in one place now, I guess. Everything used to be separate. You had to like find things on your own or like see where somebody would find something and then you would just like hear about it through word of mouth. But that word of mouth didn't exist online because social media like wasn't a thing. You would have to read about it on message boards.
Pretty
And there
much.
were message boards, but they're all separate. And so unless you found one that actually had good advice, if you found like a good thing, it took a long time for other people to find it. It was definitely a lot more challenging.
See you guys next week for more Lost Hero and whatever stupid antics the world gets up to. Bye.